afternoon. My name is Nicole Rotatori, and I'm part of the communications and marketing team here at CECP. I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Doing Good When Times Are Bad, Recession-Proofing Your Social Impact. We have an amazing panel today for what I anticipate will be a great discussion. We want to start off with a special thank you to our partner and sponsor, Blackbaud, for curating today's webinar. And before we get into a brief overview on CECP, we just want to launch a quick poll to take a quick pulse check to see where our audience is in terms of planning corporate responsibility initiatives and programs. So the poll question is, does your company employ a long-term planning strategy when talking about your corporate social responsibility? Please take a moment to answer this question, and we'll come back to that in a moment with the results. So for those of you who are new to CECP, just a quick overview about what we do. Our purpose is to empower companies to drive long-term business success through positive social impact. And the way we do this is through the power of our network of affiliates. CECP was founded in 1999 by actor and philanthropist Paul Newman and other business leaders. And this movement, as you can see from all of these different companies that are involved, now represents 11.2 trillion in revenue, 23 billion in total community investments, 14 million employees, 30 million hours of employee engagement, and over 200 plus companies participating with us. We organize our approach around 5 centers of excellence. We've identified these as key ways to approach specific challenges companies are facing. So they're telling the story, societal community investment, employee engagement, environment, social governance, and sustainable business, and diversity, equity, inclusion. Today's session is focusing on CECP's Center of Excellence of Societal and Community Investment. So let's take a quick look at the result of our poll that we just took. Okay, this is great to see. 88% of our attendees do employ a long-term planning strategy, and 13% do not currently employ a long-term planning strategy, but they're working on it. So as you can see, we recently took a poll of a pulse survey of our affiliate companies here at CECP and asked them the same question. And we had 30 respondents answer the question, and you can see the results below, and they do pretty much line up to what we saw our results today. We had 77% of our respondents saying they do employ a long-term planning strategy, while the remaining 23% said they don't, working on this for the future. So this is great to see that a lot of our companies are in line with either already looking at long-term plans or getting one in place. So we have a wonderful panel to discuss some of their strategic planning around their corporate responsibility initiatives today. And we're also going to leave a little bit of time at the end for audience Q&A. So please feel free at any point to submit your questions in the Q&A function found on your Zoom toolbar. And now please join me in welcoming Michael McKinnon, Senior Sales Manager, Corporate Solutions at Blackbaud. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Nicole, and excited about having an opportunity to work today with an incredible panel of leaders in the space as we think about recession-proofing our social impact. As many of you know, Blackbaud and the Your Cause solution serves north of 600 organizations globally. And many of them are thinking about this very topic. So I think it's very timely as we think about where organizations and how organizations are preparing, and very fortunate to be joined by 3 of our clients today with AbbVie, Kimberly-Clark, and Bayer to talk through this. And I just wanted to quickly introduce our panel. So joining us today, we have Kimberly-Clark, and that's Jenny Lewis, and she is the Vice President of the Foundation for Kimberly-Clark Corporation. We also have Tanya Zhang from AbbVie, who leads is the Director of their Global Philanthropy and Employee Engagement. And finally, we've got Andrea Acerbi from Bayer, who is Head of Social Innovation and Corporate Giving. So thank you all for joining us. Excited about our opportunity to speak with you today. And really just want to kick it off with a question that I think most organizations are talking to, which is, one, if you could just give us a little background on yourself, we'd love to learn a little bit more there, but also a little background on how your company approaches strategic planning on its total community investments? And do you plan year to year or a longer segment, a longer time segment? And how do you align that approach to your business's mission and values? And maybe we'll start off with you, Jenny, and give us a sense of what you're doing there at Kimberly-Clark.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. So I, as was mentioned, I am Vice President of the Kimberly-Clark Foundation. It is a 70-year-old foundation within our company. Our company actually turns 150 this year. And so the KC Foundation is involved in basically all of our global strategic social impact programs on a global level, down to a national level, down to a local level. So it is basically the philanthropic arm, the CSR arm of our global company. So, Michael, I'm going to answer the second part of your question first, which is aligning to business mission and values, and kind of go over. So pretty much everything on the slide encompasses the North Star for Kimberly-Clark, if you will. So we have defined our strategy with a clear path towards 2030. We would typically plan business planning in a 5-year increment. But in this particular case, because we were turning 150 years old this year, we took a little bit of a bolder approach and increased our ambitions and did more of an 8-year planning approach to get us all the way to 2030. So in the upper left-hand corner is our corporate purpose. So this is what guides our entire company and all of our 40,000+ employees across the world. So it's better care for a better world is what leads our company. And when we talk about care within Kimberly-Clark, it really means it's the heart of who we are, and it's really defined us and our culture for the past 150 years. And so our aspiration is to do even more, to enable better living and to provide people with the most critical needs so they can enjoy what's important to them. And so we fulfill that purpose in a couple different ways. One is through our values. We care, we own, we act in the right-hand corner. So these are everyone is held accountable to these specific values. And then in the bottom left is our ways of working. So another way that we bring these to light, we talk about these ways of working in pretty much every aspect of performance, of employee engagement, is how are we staying true to our ways of working, our values, which ladder up to our purpose. And so the bottom right corner talks about our culture. So this gets a little bit more into, community investments. And our culture also revolves around care. And we talk about being purpose-led and performance-driven. Again, it's our purpose that leads us in our company, but it's our performance that enables us to care. And so the better we do, the better that we can help society is one aspect of it, but it isn't all about performance from a numbers perspective. It's also defined on our performance as we impact people's lives. So caring for each other, caring for our employees, caring for our individuals. It wraps all of that together for us at KC. So we talk about better care for better world as a calling for us to do more for each other, for our consumers and our communities. So that's, again, kind of our North Star and our business value, that everything that we do ladders up to this. So if you go to the next slide, I'll kind of take that to the next level. So from our planning perspective, we also put a 2030 ambition around our community goals. So we have a goal set to improve the lives of 1 billion people with half the environmental footprint by 2030. So again, that's that 8-year cycle that we're looking at as far as our specific goals. So this is a bold goal for us at KC. It's definitely the most aspirational that we've had as a company in my history of being here. And so we know that we can't do this through traditional CSR programs. It has to be a global effort from really all facets of the business to make this happen. So we focus on strategic partnerships that we feel that can deliver sustainable change. Some of those partnerships are driven by our brands and by our business. Now, I lead the foundation, which is really specific towards CSR. But this ambition is bigger. So it's involving our brands and our businesses in a big way. And so our brands come from, I don't know how many know about Kimberly-Clark, but we make Huggies diapers, we make Kleenex, Kotex feminine care. And so our brands come from a rich history of innovation. I don't know how many of you will know, but we created the first shaped diaper for a better fit, the first disposable feminine care pad, which was pioneered by nurses on the front line of World War II, or World War I, excuse me. and the first disposable handkerchief for hygiene with Kleenex. So we have a history of innovation, and we plan to use that innovation to solve societal problems in order to meet this goal. We also do it in a little bit more of a traditional way, again, through CSR, which is where the foundation fits in. So we are focused on sustainability goal 3, 5, and 6. And we partner with global NGOs to help really bring better care to underserved communities across the world. So we do that through primarily maternal and child health programs, empowerment of women and girls programs that has a specific focus on menstrual health. And then lastly, access to sanitation. So those are kind of our 3 big bets that we focus on to help those 1 billion people. So, you know, linking back to our North Star and our purpose, everything we do links back to that, and that is our strategic plan, and this is our strategic vision. But we want to, you know, have the privilege to serve customers, build communities and careers, improve the lives of billions for the next 150 years. So,
awesome. Thank you, Jenny. That certainly gives us some insight about the longer term component of it and the alignment with the strategic goals, which is fantastic. Would love, Andrea, to get a sense for how you're thinking about that there at Bayer.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, no, just listening to Jenny speak, I think there is a lot of resonance here. I mean, what we do at Bayer is totally linked to so I'm responsible for social innovation, corporate giving at Bayer. That means I'm taking care of every donation and corporate social responsibility program that we run in the company. And as you can think, being present in over 80 countries means we coordinate it through different philanthropy arms. So we do have the corporate organizations, so the business organizations in all of the countries, which have their own projects which are run locally. But we also have the global projects, so the big partnerships that we run, for example, with the WHO or other international organizations, which are run and steered globally. And mainly we have the Bayer Foundation as well, which I would say is our main philanthropic arm, in addition to some local foundations we have. So it's a very broad, I would say, structure to generate the CSR activities that we have within the company. Today I'll be speaking more about the foundation, and I think the alignment with the business purpose and vision is everywhere. So in all of those arms, being a company which is active in the healthcare sector, so with medicines and consumer health products, but also in agriculture, so with agricultural inputs, makes it very easy for us to link our corporate social responsibility activities with our vision, which is a vision of a world with health for all and hunger for none. So this is what the foundation stands for, and the programs we support. So going to your question, how do we plan that? Basically, the whole strategy is aimed at getting together programs that would increase the quality of healthcare access, mainly in the countries with very reduced access. So we focus on low and mid-income countries mainly. And of course, everything that has to do with nutrition and sustainable agricultural, but in the end, tying back to the environment. So the triangle here more or less represents the kind of projects that we look for. And that then connects to the SDGs that we're supporting mainly. There's a strong focus on women, as we see that women often hold the key for lifting people out of poverty, and this is where we focus with our programs. And we feel that being a company highly dedicated to scientific research puts us in a very good position to link science and social innovation. And this is why these are the main focus of the foundation. So we really try to leverage the impact of science towards making the world a better place. And the way we tackle that within the societal aspect is by promoting social innovation. This is I would say, the niche that we have chosen at Bayer to support. Now, how that all ties up into the planning, as you can imagine, those different arms have different planning phases and different planning processes. But in the end, we hold it all together through a global coordination. And of course, we also look into long-term planning. I think this is not in place since long ago. So very openly speaking, some 5 years ago, the planning was still done on an annual basis. And we have started with the foundation specifically to look into 5-year planning, at least, for specific programs. And that has totally paid off. So we see that the long-term planning really enables and the long-term impact. it increases drastically our credibility and the ability to attract partners, and also to demonstrate impact, which I would say shows to be very helpful then in crisis situations, which is what we are going to talk about today. So having the impact visible and easy to demonstrate clearly helps us a lot in maintaining and keeping the resources we need to keep up the work. So I leave it there so we can discuss more in the next question.
Fantastic, Andrea. Thank you for the background. And again, I think, interesting to hear some overlaps in some of the work that you're doing. And at Kimberly-Clark, certainly a focus on women, which is interesting. Maybe we can dive a little bit into that in a moment. But would love to get your perspective, Tanya, and how AbbVie is thinking about it, and a little bit more background on your role there within the organization.
Sure, absolutely. And so my role at AbbVie is I lead the philanthropic employee engagement programs at AbbVie. And so that is part of the overall global philanthropy enterprise. So the programs that I lead are volunteering, giving. We also have a program with ERGs. We work alongside them to determine what are the best nonprofits to support with their affinity groups, and the foundation supports $100,000 worth of grants on behalf of ERGs. We also have a scholarship program for employee children to continue to promote education, secondary education, as well as an employee relief program, which has actually been really critical in the last couple of disasters, specifically with Hurricane Fiona. So those are like the big buckets of the work that I do, which ladders up to the Global Philanthropy Organization, which is really the AbbVie Foundation. And so the AbbVie Foundation has three specific pillars of work, which are effective education, sustainable healthcare, as well as building strong communities, which is really more about like the basic needs and all of that. What I would say is overall, in terms of business and company values, we have 5 principles that we follow at AbbVie, which is very clear on our website. And one of the 5 principles is serving the community. We have transforming lives, acting with integrity, driving innovation, embracing diversity and inclusion, and then serving the community. So those are the guiding principles across our the way, like the fabric and the DNA of how we work. But serving the community is one of those really key pillars, and which is important to the employee engagement work that I do. On the foundation side, we do have long-term planning. We have a 5-year forecast of like where we're looking, but we do like an annual board type of like discussion every year to kind of like either those goals change or they stay the same, and all of the assumptions. What I would also say is, because I am in the employee engagement space, we also have a little bit of a different planning cycle, because we also use corporate dollars to support some of the work. So there's a little bit of, we go with the corporate cycle, which is obviously it's an annual cycle, but there are other like long-term plans across the company, but we do an annual cycle for our corporate budgets. But the foundation is a little bit more, I would say, for forecasting into the future, especially given the times that we are in now.
Awesome. Thank you, Tanya. And I think a couple of themes come out of there, right? One is, thinking longer term certainly is appropriate, right? As we're building out our engagement strategies, while a year-to-year plan is always going to be part of that, thinking beyond the 1-2 year timeframes, but getting into that 5, and in the case of Kimberly-Clark, up to that 8-year window, which is fantastic. As we transition, I'd love to shift gears a little bit to the topic at hand, right? No surprise if we turn on the TV or listen to any financial reporting that recessions are looming, and cost cutting and inflationary impacts and pressures are broadly affecting, whether it's from supply chain to the day-to-day lives of most people. As you think about that from a planning and decision-making standpoint, how are your organizations, or are you making decisions that are being influenced by whether it's a looming recession or even just a need to make budget cuts with an eye towards that if we aren't in a full-blown recession. How are you thinking about that? And have there been times in the past where you've had to either sunset or pause a program based on that? And if so, how did you handle that? Would love, Andrea, to get a sense from how you're doing at Bayer.
Sure. No, that's definitely a timely discussion, Michael. And when I saw the invitation, I thought, yeah, that's the right time. I think unfortunately, there are several points in time when we have to come across those situations. And yeah, by all means. So I think as any other department or arm of the company, we are also asked to deliver savings when times are bad. And I think having here a very professionalized way of steering CSR is key to be able to demonstrate to the business, for example, with strategic planning, where we are heading, that we know where we're heading, and that how much is really needed to keep up with the long-term objectives that we have in place, like every other area and business areas, I would say, in the company. So in that sense, I think having a clear strategy and prioritization possibilities is key. And when we ourselves are faced with that situation, that's, I think, the first thing we look into. So if we really want to generate long-term impact and we have a clear vision on the kind of projects that we want to support, those that really generate capacity, that go into creating sustainable solutions, which are not dependable on grants forever and that are taking their own way, we would definitely keep those that we know are going to, in the long term, keep delivering on impact. I have to say, of course, this is, I think, very hard times, very hard decisions to take. And all of us here wearing this hat, I think, have gone through this. It's always not good news to give, but I think when you have a clear strategy, you're actually able to preserve what really matters. And I would say maybe as a practical aspect, we are also looking into innovating in the way that we react. For example, I think you've mentioned disaster. You can, of course, be very bold in your response to disasters, but you can also be preventive. So when times are better, what we are looking into at Bayer is how can we be, enabling organizations to better prepare for disaster relief rather than just coming in when it occurs. And that also, I think, to some point, gives us some more room when the budgets are shorter or cut, so that we really have prepared and enabled organizations to be better prepared when that happens. One thing I would like to mention in our specific strategy, so we have chosen, and this has been a long-term decision, but we have chosen to dedicate to a specific niche, which is social entrepreneurship. This is what we support at Bayer. And I really like this because in the end, it makes our partners and the organizations we support less dependent and more resilient, even to navigate with us when times are bad. So meaning that while we create capacity in our partnerships with them over the years, they're also able to navigate better when things are not as good. And I think that also comes with the openness to be able to fund projects together with other corporates or other organizations. So we are totally open to co-funding. And what we offer sometimes is that we partner up with organizations, enabling them to be funded also by other partners. And that has helped us in dealing with those difficult times.
Great comments. Jenny, would you add anything there in terms of how Kimberly-Clark's looking at that from a budgetary perspective?
No, very similar approaches, actually. We've been on a challenging several years. I mean, not only from a recessionary perspective, but being a consumer products company, COVID has impacted our business globally significantly. Maybe not in the area of toilet paper, I will give us that, but beyond that, it's been tough. It's been a huge hit to our businesses as people are pulling back in some of their spend. So the way we look at that as far as community investments, and our former CEO, Tom Falk, longtime CEO at Kimberly-Clark and a mentor of mine, I will never forget during a significant restructure and budget tightening exercise in 2018, he was very, very clear to the entire company, you will not touch the foundation. And he said, it's because the society and communities where we live and work need the money more than we do, so do not touch it. So I will never forget that. And it sends a really strong message to our company that we need to stay true to our commitments in communities and to society if we're ever going to really solve the societal problem. So And I think too, when it comes to recession and tough times, the better that you can bake CSR and community investments into your business, into your corporate profile, into your, so in our cases, we are a house of brands, to really integrate purpose into our brand profiles. It's not as easy to get cut or restricted, right? Because it's part of who you are. It's part of who these brands are. And so we're on that journey. That's not an easy thing to do. And that's definitely where we want to go as a company, is to really have that integrated and fully baked, because it's not something that you can just lop off when times get tough. Now, during times of recession, I will say, the business might take a pause as far as how they leverage some of our social partnerships. So maybe they won't do as much consumer activation, or they won't do as much digital media, that kind of things. But the investments that we make in the society absolutely do not pause. The social work will continue. So, looking forward on how we hope to address these types of things in the future is really about a shared plan. So it's not all about CSR to live out your purpose and care for communities, but how do you share that with the business, and how do you share that with, the overall assets of your company? Like, as Andrea mentioned, innovation. How do you bring that to the table to really help to reach your goals?
Fantastic. Tanya, would you add anything there from AbbVie?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this year has been really interesting. And one of the things that we are doing, I think just better, not just, because of the recession, is like to have a real rigor around what we're doing, right? So this year, what was really important for us to do is to do scenario planning. And so in the past, I would say it was really a matter of like which or what, whereas like this year we had 3 different scenarios of like thinking through, like for every single thing, we really pressure tested every single one of the things that we were already committed to. And so I would say that the level of commitment didn't, there's still a very, very strong commitment to serving our communities. It's a very integral part of who we are, but it's like, how are they best optimized and leveraged? And what are things that need to happen in order to keep that momentum going, but also really pressure testing them across the portfolio.
So it's interesting. One of the things I'm hearing, and this is probably, and I'd be interested in your thoughts, is if you want to be part of the business, you need to treat it almost like a part of the business, right? I need to make sure that I can talk to the value that I'm providing as an organization. To Andrea, your point about prioritization, that I understand where we need to prioritize if things get tougher, and how am I baked into the business, and sort of being able to, actually understand where the, you don't call it profits necessarily, but we're not just this place where somebody throws money, right? We're also involved, and we have a real solid business process by which we engage with, the broader business. I think that's important. So as we transition from thinking about that, we mentioned sort of internally focused, most organizations that we partner with here at Your Cause and Blackbaud have our external nonprofit partners, right? Are you doing anything unique with your partners in the, the charity side, in thinking about some of these cuts and challenges in order to continue the partnership, but maybe doing it in a different way? Tanya, any insights there from AbbVie?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we at AbbVie have very strong long-term partners. And so really year after year, we have some go-to ones. And recession has been hard, right? Because what I would say is that a lot of people, like a lot of nonprofits, they're struggling with the same things that we all are with personnel, especially since they're not as competitive as maybe companies can offer. So they're really, I think, short-staffed. But also the cost of goods. So like, for example, I run a lot of volunteer programs that take supplies, right? Like paint, or like really some of those basic things that are subject to inflation. And I think it's really trying to build in and listen and go. And again, that whole pressure testing, like if I don't have additional funds that I can give to offset some of those inflationary things, like what are things that we need to just look at differently? For example, instead of doing like doing something that needs maybe construction in a volunteer project, what are things that I can shift to? Like, for example, like, do I do clean and shine projects, right? Versus really heavy construction ones. So I think it's thinking a little bit differently of like getting to your goals, and we're being creative with nonprofits. And I think ultimately we're going to have to, look at these inflationary pressures, especially with the budgets that if they stay the same, and shift the way that we're thinking. But I think overall it's really about those long-term relationships that you have and having some like really honest conversations with those nonprofits, to say like, where are you really struggling with, and like, why aren't you able to maybe get to those traditional levels that that you haven't been before. And I think adjusting to that as well.
And another exercise in prioritization on their part, right? So, if we're limited, we have to make sure that we understand where we can get the biggest impact for our partnership. Andrea, did you have some thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I think that's those are the difficult conversations, and what Tanya just said also resonates quite a bit. So we support a lot of smallholder farmers projects across the global south, and they are struggling with fertilizers price just as any other farmer in the world. So we feel the pain, and one of the things we have been thinking and doing quite a bit is to increase our product donations whenever we can. So actually optimizing and finding more opportunities for product donations. So both in the healthcare sector, but also in agriculture sector, we see that maybe there are other opportunities which we can leverage and still help some organizations. We are also looking into amplifying our pro bono volunteering opportunities around the globe. So we have it as a strong program in many countries, but not all of them. So I think this is a moment where this gets a bit also more attention so that we can leverage that. And as I mentioned, one of the things we're offering some of the partners to continue to support them is to link them. So through our networks, and I think this is one of the advantages of bringing it close to the business, right? To your expertise. The partners we support might really profit from the network that we have, so that they can also get funding in other sources. So it could be multilateral banks that we are connected with. It could be other corporates or suppliers or customers. So trying to leverage on our network so that they also have more sources, and introducing them to those sources is one of the things we think we can explore more. And we've been trying to do it in those crisis times.
Excellent. And Jenny, is there, from a Kimberly-Clark perspective, your partnerships within the charity and nonprofit, longer standing? Are you thinking about how you're engaging with them, given the current environment?
Oh, definitely. So, when I think about the nonprofit landscape, I mean, I would say, yes, it's impacted by COVID, recession, everything that in the last several years, but the whole landscape, I think, of the nonprofit world has changed significantly. Again, having been in this role for 14 years at KC, when we first started, and I first came on board, we were very much around domestic philanthropic gifts. So it was a grant that you made to an organization that aligned with a series of goals. You shook hands, thank you, and that was it, right? To this migration towards really strategic social responsibility, to where we want to get to, which is really a shared value platform. So the better we do as a business, the better that we can help society, and what investments do we bring to the table. So that's really the evolution I've seen as a nonprofit landscape altogether. But with regards to your specific question about, this time in recession, so similar to Andrea, we definitely amped up product donations. Times of disaster relief, we donated about $1 million worth of product to Ukraine relief efforts. So families that needed basic essentials, like diapers and toilet paper, we were able to leverage that. We co-founded a national diaper bank network in the US that helps families that struggle with basic needs to give them diapers. So that's definitely something that we've done in times to try to help balance some of our investments. But lastly, I'd say is, new partnerships. We're not cutting anything. So that's kind of where we are today. But as we look at potential new partnerships, we look at them completely different than we did 10 years ago. So they are very, very heavily scrutinized as to the depth of reach, the depth of impact. How are we measuring the impact? How are we measuring our contribution as a business towards that impact? It's a whole different conversation than it was before. And I think that's kind of the new landscape that we're dealing with when we evaluate, new partners, and how they add value to the business, how they add value to societies, and how do you leverage each other's strengths.
Excellent. Yeah, that impact measurement piece is really a kind of a critical component. They're not just the output, but the impact, right? And that's an important dialogue. The last question really focused on sort of that external, right? So the community and the charities that we work with and nonprofits, which is an important part of that. I'd be interested to understand, more and more, obviously, the employees are stakeholder number one, right? As we think about our engagement strategies and corporate social responsibility, that oftentimes that's an inward focus. Would love to understand, how does, your impact and connection, how do they impact your planning and strategy for your corporate responsibility initiatives? And then during a recession, do you develop other programs, whether it's a hardship program or scholarships that are directed at your employees? Andrea, any thoughts there?
Yeah, so picking up on the Ukrainian example that Jenny just mentioned. So we have 700 employees in the Ukraine, and as soon as the war started, we figured out that besides the CSR activity, so Bayer has donated over 10 million in funds and products over there, but we realized our employees need help now because they're also fleeing or staying or whatever situation they had. So there was a whole package there to help them out. So there was a kind of a per diem allowance, to help those who had fled to keep up with the new, where are you going to leave? So be it a hotel or a shelter, they needed some extra funds to be kept in a good situation or a reasonable situation. There was a kind of assurance of employment for a minimum period of time, at least, because everybody was uncertain what's going to happen to the business. And you can add some other, I would say, help initiatives that were put in place there. During COVID, of course, all over the world, employees were helped in different ways. Be it with different access to medication, to vaccines, to what we could in terms of training and supporting and mental health and what have you. So I think it's a very important pillar that we in crisis situations, we definitely look into employees in a differentiated way that we would do normally, even more. And what I would like to say is how relevant this is, as you said. So for employee engagement, the way we behave in our societal engagement in general is just key. So the level of involvement of employees, for example, again, in the Ukrainian situation, we held an employee donation campaign together with our own efforts. And that was did in partnership with the German Red Cross, and the level of engagement was just never seen before. So we were putting together, employees donated themselves 1 million euros at the time, and we matched that. And then you see the power that people really, the unlocked power that we have in employees, and how much you really need to keep investing, be it in mobilizing, enabling them to mobilize, but also supporting them when times are difficult. So definitely, I totally see the key point here in keeping employees involved and with a special attention, especially when the times are hard.
And how are you communicating that so obviously €1 million plus a matching component to that, in terms of communicating what's happened with that? Where is it going? How is it impacting? And what are you doing with that? How important is that piece to the employees that you're engaging with?
So that's one of the key points. We always want to be transparent and let them know where this is going, how this is happening. So we created a blog. One of the colleagues in our team created a blog with daily updates on everything that was going on in the Ukraine. This is how relevant it became, especially for the European organization. And there we had questions every day, and we were, day to day depicting which organizations were being supported with that money until it was fully used, and there's still much more to come. So I think that's part of the engagement, right? It's not just about raising the funds; it's about then participating and involving employees then on the decisions and on the giving full transparency of what's happening with it afterwards.
Great. Tanya, Jenny, any comments you'd have there specific to your sort of the inward focus and engaging your employees?
Yeah, I'd have just a couple builds. I mean, very similar approach to Andrea as far as, Ukraine, and Russia for that matter, we put our employees first, and we did. And again, that links back to purpose, right? What are we here to do and to accomplish? And so helping our employees to get to safety, making sure that everyone was accounted for, summer. I mean, that was a huge effort on our company and making sure that they had the essentials that they needed. And we've also enacted a series of what we're calling caring conversations through our company. So we're having some of our senior leaders invite employees just to sit down and basically everything's fair game. You know, tell me what's on your mind. Tell me how you're feeling. Tell me, you know, how COVID's affecting you, how the recession is affecting you, what's going on in your life. And never in my career have I been a part of a conversation where I had so much emotion, witnessing so much emotion from employees, and just really establishing a safe place where people can share and to really reflect on their feelings and what's going on in their world. So I think that's been huge for us. And when it comes to CSR efforts in particular, you know, we've been trying to get better at engaging employees in the efforts, because everyone raised their hands and says, I want to get involved. What can I do? And in a lot of ways, we look at that more than just volunteerism. So we also focus a lot on social innovation, and we recruit a lot of our employees as mentors to social entrepreneurs that need help on business development, or they need help on supply chain or marketing or whatever. We mentor them in their business to help them to deliver. In the particular case that we do the most of is sanitation solutions to some of the most remote areas of the world. And so we help them to build their business so that they can help to do their part to resolve the sanitation crisis. So that's kind of a way that we look at it a little bit differently, to bring employees to the front lines, if you will, of CSR, to help us solve some of these problems.
Excellent. Tanya, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that has been a very clear focus here at AbbVie is our employees, because as a pharma company, that, you know, it is mostly about the people that are innovating new medicines, and it's very heavy on the people power to continue to drive innovation and new things for our company. So I would say we've had a really great history of employee engagement programs. And this year, what we did is that we really leaned into those historic programs. So for example, our signature week of service event was really critical, because it's the first time that everybody was coming together all over the company together back into our communities, which was really big because COVID happened. We also had a major acquisition. So this is the first time that many of the employees were meeting together, meeting their colleagues for the first time. And so that like in-person spirit, which, you know, I'm sure being on a virtual call like we are right now, I mean, like there's a lot of them, but I think there's also something about getting back into the community in a hands-on way that has really, you know, fostered that kind of team building and teamwork. And I think it's really speaking especially to our senior leaders, and they're looking for ways, because especially in this time where there is a lot of there's a lot of turnover, and you know, you don't want your talent to go somewhere else. And I would say one of the things that we've done in the past is also really talk with the leaders with the same tools that they're using. So one of the things that I've done in the past on our volunteer programs, or basically a lot of our engagement programs, is use the data that I get from our platform with Blackbaud, actually, is to take the data and have that cross tab with our employee culture survey. So, and I've been able to show, like, you know, if you volunteer, that you get 4 points higher overall on your culture survey. You feel X amount more developed, so that you're speaking in the same language.
Yeah.
Like I can send them all sorts of, like, you know, purpose at work, you know, all sorts of external research. But when you talk about it in the terms that they're measuring their own success under, it makes it a lot more relevant. It's like, oh, really being a part of it. And so all of our senior leaders were very supportive of our big volunteer program. I mean, they came and they spoke, they you know, sent cascades of emails. So I think it's just continuing that momentum and showing that we're supporting year round. So another big thing that we did is that we rebranded all of the employee engagement programs under one pillar, so that you could see that there is a consistent thing that you do. So whether it's volunteering or giving, or like how we expand our philanthropy to our employees through our support programs, like the relief programs and the scholarship programs, just to see that this is and ongoing support of the communities, but also ways that our employees can really leverage that as well.
That's great. And obviously being able to tie it to your employee, truly they're, on their pulse surveys and making sure that they're actually, that translation of giving and engaging in one area is going to make them a more engaged employee is fantastic. We're going to be turning it over to Q&A here in just a minute. So if you, as an audience member, have something that you'd like to ask one of our panelists today, please feel free to put that in the Q&A. We'll make sure to get that to them. But I did want to pose one final question. And if I could ask each of you just to share maybe one and quickly the one or two benefits as you see it to having, like we've talked about today, that strategic plan in place for your social impact and CSR efforts as we're heading into maybe more difficult recessionary times. And maybe Jenny, you can kick us off and we'll wrap up.
Sure. No, that's a great question. I guess I'm of the opinion that us as companies and corporations have a tremendous responsibility now more than ever to really step up and have a role in society. So if we're going to fulfill that responsibility, we have to commit. We have to commit to goals. We have to commit to really leaning in to solve some of these issues. And strategic plans can help you to do that. I talk a lot inside the company when we're talking about new programs or even existing programs for that matter, that this is not a toe dip in the water to test it. This is a commitment that we're making. And societal impact, it takes time. It takes time to really to get somewhere, to really change behavior norms or practices, or it takes time and it takes a commitment from a company. So I think that having a strategic plan to help you to stay on course is super important, because once you cut budgets and you pull back from things, anyone that spent a lot of time in a larger corporation will know it's very difficult to get them back.
Yeah.
So if you're really staying true to your purpose and to your commitments to communities, you need to stay the course, and a strategic plan can help you to get there.
Great. Andrea, anything you'd add?
Yeah, no, by all means. I think we're in a situation, we're in a position where it might be a little bit harder to evidence the value of what we are doing, just because it's not, as you say, it takes time, Jenny. So of course, we know what's behind what we do, right? So it's basically contributing to a better society internally. I mean, depending on the stakeholder you're talking to, this is brand value, this is reputation, but that's not something you can measure in 1 year or two, right? That takes time. So it's while other areas might have an easier time improving the value of what they're doing, I think ours really definitely needs to have a very sophisticated and well-functioning strategy to keep your board on board in the sense that you know what you're doing it as professionally as any other area, and that it is totally tied to your company values and mission. So it does need to be at all times prioritized. So having a strategy, I think, for internal purposes, besides for external purposes, so for preserving impact and so on, as we spoke, but also for internal purposes, that's just key. We need to show that we know what we're doing and we know where we are heading, and what's needed to keep that ongoing. That's, I think, a no-go. Not having a good strategy is definitely a no-go.
Excellent. Tanya, any comments from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. At AbbVie, we're at an inflection point, I would say, in terms of strategy. So, we've had this strategy that we've had for the last 10 years. So we've technically been a company only for 10 years because we were spun off from Abbott. But I think what we're really trying to do is look in the future, but really taking a methodical, evidence-based approach, because a lot has changed. For our company, again, we've doubled in size. We've also, we're in a post-COVID world. We're in different areas. So I think we've really changed as a company, and right now that's what we're really trying to look at. So I think our strategy has worked, and it still could, right, for the next 10 years, but how can we sharpen that philanthropic purpose? And that is part of that diligence and that rigor that we're trying to add into and lean on, because that will be critical in the next coming couple of years.
Excellent. Well, Tanya, Andrea, and Jenny, thank you so much for all of your comments here. We did have a couple of Q&A that I'd love to throw out to the panel, if we could. The first one around, do your companies in terms of your overall philanthropic forecasts, as you look at outer years, do they reflect any goal to spend? So for example, a percentage of pre-tax profit, or a 1% commitment or goal. So curious to see if that's something that you've aligned, or is it more a general alignment?
I would say ours right now is more of a general alignment, but what I found, at least at AbbVie, is that during really key moments in time, that there is a commitment to address issues. So for what I will say, for example, in 2020, when there was a racial, where there were, I mean, I guess there's still continued unrest, but addressing the unrest, we committed to $50 million over 5 years. And to look at it as a long term, so not necessarily about like a 1% of like what we're spending like year to year, but like what can we really think about and making long-term commitments, because social change is long-term, right? So if you depend on like a specific number, like you need to really think through what those the long-term trajectory is of that.
Excellent. I think that's a great response there. Another question that came in is, and I think this speaks to some of the alignment questions we've been talking about, baking into the business, et cetera, is how do you get buy-in from senior leadership and employees for new and continuing initiatives in this economic environment? Andrea, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think we've tackled a couple of those, as you said. I think it needs, we need to more and more show how tied this is to the business objectives, to the mission and to the vision of the company and to our values, that's for sure. And I think it's all about evidence. So we can no longer go with the buzzwords. And as you said, Tanya, it's bringing evidence of the impact that we are generating. So to the last question, the overall amount donated, of course, this is relevant and it needs to be kept in sound levels. But I would say at Bayer, since some time we have adopted the motto, so we don't want to be recognized by the amount we give, but by the impact that we really drive. So, doing the best use of the resources and evidencing that what is done and what could even be, greater or even more, I would say boldly done. I think this is how we get the buy-in. And as soon as you demonstrate that, these are business people, right? So the management, they for sure follow a strategy that is, funded in a good basis, I think. And with employees, I think that's normally a given. If you have a good communication strategy, the energy of employees is there. And I think it's more about how to make the best use of it and not to bring it up because it's there. That's the feeling we have.
Yeah, the communication strategy is critical. And it's interesting. We've got a question, Tanya, that I think speaks to your correlation between engagement and volunteerism. And they were making the comment that they've tried to add a question to the employee engagement survey, but as opposed to reconciling multiple reports. Is that something you've looked into? They're getting some HR resistance to that, maybe in terms of adding that to their employee engagement survey. But I think that you caught on to a really important piece in terms of how those two correlate.
What I would say is it's a journey. So, and I think it really it's about, well, first of all, I would say persistence. It's the first thing. Because right now, I'm actually on the verge of being able to have just a general community question in the actual survey. So you think that in the 10-year history, we're talking about it. But I think there's a few things that I would say is one is that with HR, it's buy-in, right? So it's like fitting within the systems. And yes, it is having to reconcile multiple reports is hard. But what I would say is, like, I've done it over like 2 or 3 cycles. And so it's like just continuing to understand those HR cycles, when you can even ask to get a question in the survey. So for example, we do our survey in May, right? And so I know I have to start talking to my HR survey person like September, November, when they're developing the questions. So it's just like really kind of understanding the business cycle,
getting ahead of it,
and and just moving forward with it. But again, it's tough, and I think But now is the time, I would say, especially with the focus on ESG, with everything going on in the world. I do think that HR people are understanding the importance of that. So I would say now is the time to just kind of get your questions in.
Excellent. One final question as we approach the top of the hour here, and Jenny, I'll let you jump after this one, which is, how do you promote your organization's work internally and externally?
Oh gosh, we do it in a lot of different ways. I'd say internally, we've seen a significant trend and pull from employees to want to hear more about what are we doing on sustainability efforts, what are we doing on social impact. That didn't used to exist as much. So, you know, global town halls, investor calls, you know, regional leadership meetings. There's always a piece of that that's dedicated to how are we progressing against these broad goals, and how do we celebrate successes. So we do a lot of employee spotlights, business spotlights, you know, what they're doing and how they're living their purpose and how they're doing that in companies. So we do that a lot internally, more than we ever have in the past. As far as externally, I mean, probably similar to most companies, we try to share stories. So we share stories of impact, you know, case studies from the NGO partnerships that we have, highlighting need. So using our voice to be ambassadors for some of the causes that we're trying to solve, for using our voice to do that in different ways. So a lot of on social panels like this. I am leading a coalition on a business-led coalition on sanitation, right? So using that and Kimberly-Clark's muscle to band together with other companies to help drive social change. So it's, if you are revolving all of those things on all cylinders, I think you'll be able to really share that powerfully. And then one thing I would just add to a prior question, if that's okay, around selling in new programs, because I know that's tough, and I know that's a challenge that a lot of people face. And the success that we've had really at Kimberly-Clark is, you know, going back to how I talked about baking it into the business, is it's not a philanthropy ask, it's not a CSR ask, it's a business case. So you develop a business case that goes through, how is this going to help society? How is this going to help the business? How is this going to help employees? And you treat it as a business proposition. We all want to do the right thing and help in communities, but now, especially more than ever in times like this, you have to show the business advantages. And so if you talk in their terms, senior executives, they want to know about impact. They want to know, how am I going to grow the business? How, you know, so if you stage it in that perspective, I think your success rate will go up. At least that's been my experience. So just my 2 cents.
And that's, you know, from the, you know, more than 600 clients we work with, that's one of the key things that's mentioned is, how do I show it to a, you know, relate it to a business impact, and that's going to give us validation that we need to continue to improve and grow our programming, which I think is a great point, Jenny. Well, obviously we've approached the top of the hour. I wanted to lift up here and one, express my gratitude to Tanya from AbbVie, Andrea from Bayer, and Jenny from Kimberly-Clark, to spend time with us sharing what you're doing as incredible global organizations that are leading the charge in driving CSR and social impact across the globe. And we thank you for your time today. And I'll hand it back to Nicole as we wrap up.
Thank you so much, Michael. And again, thank you, Andrea, Jenny, and Tanya, for your insights and experiences and sharing them with us all today. We really appreciate it. Thank you again to Blackbaud for sponsoring this roundtable. We'd like to leave you with one last panel. We ask you to take this last poll before you go regarding your satisfaction with today's webinar. And then we invite you to join us at one of our upcoming events, November 22nd. And you guys are hearing this here first. We have a webinar coming out on our report release, sort of a sneak peek on our new report, Creating Change with Corporate Foundations, Designing for Impact. So if you log on that day, you'll get a little sneak peek on the report before it's actually released on the 29th. December 6th, we have an industry roundtable focused on financials. And December 8th, we have our Digital Empowers virtual forum series, narrowing the digital gender gap. Thank you again for attending, and we will be sharing this recording with everyone soon. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.